Well, hello everyone and welcome to Northshore Online. My name is Samantha. I am so excited to be welcoming you to church this morning. We're so glad you're here. We've got a great morning planned and we are going to start our morning off with some worship in just a moment. But before we do that, please say hi in the chat. Let us know where you're watching from. And also, if we can be praying for you this week, we would also love to hear that as well if you feel comfortable. It's a great thing about this community is that we can do that for each other each week and just kind of hear how our weeks have been and how we can pray for each other moving forward. So please do that. And if this is your first time joining us, or maybe you're returning from last week, welcome. We're really glad that you're here. You picked an awesome Sunday to be here. We're in this series, as many of you know, called Let's Talk About It, Conversations About Faith and Mental Health. And this has just been an incredible series. I know for me personally, it has been a perfect timing for this series, honestly. I don't really know how else to describe it. So I hope it has been that way for you too as well. Just encouraging. I hope that we're learning together and finding out that there's resources and help for us when we need it. So really looking forward to Scotty's message today. It's a really good one, but we're going to get started with worship in just a moment. Thanks again for being here and welcome to Northshore Online.
Well, hey, good to see you guys. Welcome to Northshore, whether you're in this room or online. It's going to be an awesome day. So good to be together. Let's get to our feet. We're going to sing to Jesus today. Let's go. All right, let's sing together. Let praise be a weapon that silences the enemy. Let praise be a weapon that conquers all anxiety. Let it rise. Let praise arise. We sing your name in the dark and it changes everything. We sing with all we are and we claim your victory. Sing, let it rise. Let praise arise. We'll see you break down every wall. We'll watch the giants fall. We cannot survive when we praise you. The God of breakthroughs on our side. Forever lift him like. This is what freedom feels like. This is what heaven sounds like. We praise you, we praise you. Come on. This is what living looks like. This is what freedom feels like. This is what heaven sounds like. We praise you, we praise you. This is what living looks like. This is what freedom feels like. This is what heaven sounds like. We praise you, we praise you. This is what living looks like. This is what freedom feels like. This is what heaven sounds like. We praise you, we praise. We'll see you break down every wall. We'll watch the giants fall. You cannot survive when we praise you. The God of breakthroughs on our side. Forever lift him high. With all creation cry, God, we praise you. We'll see you break down every wall. We'll watch the giants fall. You cannot survive when we praise you. The God of breakthroughs on our side. Forever lift him high. With all creation cry, God, we praise you. We praise you. We praise you. We praise you. We praise you.
They say this mountain can't be moved. They say these chains will never break. But they don't know you like we do. There is power in your name. We've heard that there is no way through. We've heard the tide will never change. They haven't seen what you can
Good morning, Northshore. You guys can go ahead and take your seats. Welcome. So excited that you're here spending some time with us today. I love Sundays, getting together, getting to worship. If we have not met yet, my name is Stephen Bolt. I'm on staff here. And if this is your first time here, I want to just give a special welcome to you. Here in Northshore, something here to say is we believe that Jesus can change everything for anyone. And it sounds cool and it kind of looks sweet written up on the wall. But I'm telling you guys, no matter what you walked in here with today, no matter what your week looked like, whether you believe any of this or maybe this is your first time in church ever, Jesus can change everything for anyone. We're so excited you're here no matter what you're walking through. We believe that Jesus has something for you here today. And we would love to get to meet you. So if this is your first time or you call Northshore home, there's something called the connection card in the seat back pocket in front of you. You can take that out. On there, you'll see a spot you can put prayer requests. You can put on there if you want to take any next steps with baptism. And a checkbox you'll see on there as well is one that just says, I'm new. You can check that box. Let us know. If you're online, you can see this QR code we've got over here. You can scan it. Let us know as well. And after this experience, I would love to meet you. If you're new out at guest services table, you can bring that card with you, say hello. If you're online, welcome. I'm excited you're with us too. You can just let me know in the chat, say I'm new. I'll be jumping on there to say hello to you as well. I know for a lot of us, we got to experience just an incredible weekend last weekend. We got to do an interview with Brendan McDonough, and maybe it was your second time coming back after that. If you didn't get to see it, definitely go back and watch. It was a powerful, powerful weekend. But I actually woke up on Monday morning to an alert in my email from the company that provides all of the streaming services for us. So how we get what happens here on a Sunday morning out on the internet and around the world. And they emailed me and they're like, hey, dude, you blew through your data limits. Is everything okay? And I was like, yeah, everything's great. It was incredible. And so I got to go back and see what happened on Sunday, which just was remarkable to see. And so I was able to look back over the last couple months, and we'll throw this map up of just each one of those pins represents one person who has joined in at Northshore Online. Yeah, that is something to celebrate. And I'll tell you why, because not only, I just remember back to I think it was 2019, I got to sit over in a room we call it the Glacier Room now, but it was one of the first rooms that this church gathered in decades ago and talk about Northshore Online and what it could be. I couldn't have dreamt of what the impact has been. I sat up there and kind of talked, man, this would be cool, this would be incredible to see, but to get to see each one of these pins represents a life that's been impacted by what happened right here in Kirkland, Washington. What happens here on Sundays is not just confined to these four walls, but these are people who are not only just hearing this message, which is amazing enough, but making decisions to say yes to Jesus for the first time, to get baptized, to give through serving and financially, just taking steps in their relationship with Jesus. And so I just want to say thank you to you as well. If you give here at Northshore, know that you see the smallest percentage of what happens here on Sundays. It is going out around the world, around the country, and people are taking next steps with Jesus because of your guys' generosity. Because we have so many people who serve here, all these cameras, this amazing technology in this room. It's not just so we can have this sweet experience Sunday. People's lives are being changed because of it. So thank you guys for giving to that. It's having an incredible impact. And if you haven't taken that step yet, I want to invite you. You can do that today. Be a part of this. You can give it Northshore Online, you could give it Northshore Online, but northshore.church, or at the boxes on the way out. It's incredible to just get to hear stories of what God is doing through Northshore Online. So thank you guys so much. We're in this series right now called Let's Talk About It, conversation on faith and mental health. And just some incredible conversations, as I said. And throughout this whole thing, we're offering tons of resources, free counseling groups that are just helping people navigate through whatever you're walking through right now. And I hope you're taking advantage of those. We have another incredible message from Pastor Scotty today, talking about something I think we all can relate to, anxiety. It's an amazing message, and you're going to get a lot out of it. We're going to check this out and then invite Pastor Scotty up. Again, thank you guys so much for being here today, and welcome to Northshore.
welcome to Northshore. It's really good to see all of you who are gathered here in this space. And I want to welcome everybody who's joining us online, wherever you are in the world. We're really glad you're here as well. My name is Scotty, if I haven't met you yet. I'm the pastor here, and I am so excited you're here in particular because we've been having these conversations, I believe really important conversations about faith and mental health. In other words, we're talking about how faith relates to things like the emotions you feel and the self-image you carry, and even the discouragement that you may be facing, or as we're gonna dive into today, the worries that you battle. I didn't have really clear language for it when I was growing up, but I grew up just worrying a lot. It was kind of how I felt wired. I worried about what my parents thought of me, what other people thought of me. In school, I worried about my grades. When I got to high school, I started worrying about going on dates. I didn't actually go on any dates, but I worried how they would go if I went on dates. And when I got to college, I worried about what I should study. And then I got out of college and I worried about what career I should have or pursue. And when I was single, some of you relate to this. When I was single, I worried about finding someone to marry. In fact, I remember thinking, if I ever get married, I'll never have to worry again because marriage is just a, never-ending flow of conjugal bliss, right? You can ask Nina how that's gone over for her. And you might think when I decided to become a pastor, get into ministry, kind of follow God's call on my life, my worries would go away because of course I'm gonna be a person of faith and lead people in faith, so I should have no reason to worry. But my worries didn't go away. In fact, I don't talk about this a lot, but there were times I used to, early on in ministry, I would get so anxious before I would speak that I would wear 2 or 3 or even 4 shirts like under my shirt to make sure no one could see how much I was sweating. I was that anxious. Then in my early 30s, I decided finally to see a counselor. And I remember, I told you about this a few weeks ago. I remember that day when my counselor looked me in the eye and said, "Scotty, you have anxiety." And I remember my first thought was, no, I don't. Yeah, I know I could be a little tense, a little jittery. I might have a few extra cups of coffee the wrong day, but no, I don't have anxiety. Because I'm a pastor. I'm supposed to help people who have anxiety. But deep down somewhere, I knew as soon as she said those words, I knew she was right, in part because I started worrying about it, because that's what people with anxiety do. We worry about whatever's happening around us. What I didn't tell you a few weeks ago is in the days and weeks that followed, just how angry I got about that. Like I was really angry at God. I just felt like I'd given up everything to become a pastor or go into ministry, and I'm like, God, this is what's on my plate. Like this is how it's gonna be. I'm gonna wrestle with anxiety. And then after the anger, the discouragement began to set in. Like, well, now I'll never be successful. People won't follow me. I won't be able to have an impactful ministry because this is what I have to deal with. But mostly, as the anger subsided, the disappointment kind of subsided, mostly I just felt alone in it. And those of you who worry or wrestle with anxiety, you know this. Anxiety is by definition an isolating experience, right? Because you have all these things happening in your head that no one else knows about or has access to. But here's the good news I discovered back then, and it's even more true today, statistically speaking. The good news I discovered was I'm not alone. And if you feel anxious today, if that's what you brought in this room, if that's what you're feeling right now online, you're not alone. In fact, today, the numbers are quite remarkable, quite drastic actually. Today, over 60% of people in this country experience worry or anxiety on a regular basis. And over 20% have been diagnosed, clinically diagnosed with an anxiety disorder, like social anxiety disorder, or obsessive compulsive disorder, or panic attacks, or a phobia of some kind. And just so you know, these conditions or experiences or challenges are not just things that adults are navigating today. Little ones, children, the next generation are wrestling with this in a significant way. In fact, there's a new study that just came out of the University of Calgary not long ago that shows that 1 out of 4 kids today experience excessive worry, fear, or dread. 1 out of 4. And that's over double what it was before the pandemic. But here's what makes it such a hard thing to talk about or figure out how to talk about or figure out solutions to is there's not really one single cause or trigger, if you will, for anxiety in our lives. And again, you know this probably from your own life. Anxiety can be triggered by a decision you have to make. It can be triggered by a problem you're trying to solve or manage in your life. It can be triggered by a relationship or a challenge in a relationship. It can be triggered by your background, your family of origin, even a traumatic experience you've had in your life. There's actually, this is really fascinating, there's actually a gene, a genetic trait they've discovered that you can actually inherit from your parents that makes you more likely to experience anxiety in your life. Like it might be pre-programmed in your body. And those of you who worry like, oh no, I really have that gene. Like you're really worried right now. Like what if I have that gene? Like what's going on? And sometimes, guess what, folks? There's no clear trigger for anxiety. Some people have what's called generalized anxiety disorder. And that's basically an ongoing, persistent, and excessive worry about everyday decisions or situations. Basically, it's feeling really worried about stuff that you don't need to be worried about. And it can impair one's capacity to go through life. It can interfere with relationships and intimacy. And it can take a huge toll on a person's physical health, not just their spiritual health, but their physical health. And just to name it, because it's important that we talk really candidly in places like this, because churches don't always do this. It's really important to say the greater the impairment, the greater the need for physical or therapeutic intervention of some kind. Like if you're feeling like you can't make a decision at all, or if you can't even get out of bed today, like that's the next step for you is not just a sermon, it's a counselor. And by the way, as we've said throughout the series, if you're not sure what to do about that or that feeling, you can text us anytime. You can text the word reach out to 97000. We will help you find your next step or that counselor. In fact, if you can't afford counseling, we'll take care of the first month for you. Because it can be such an impairment to people's actual daily life. But for the rest of the message, I want to spend some time walking through how I think God responds to us when we're anxious or when we're worried or when our fears kind of get our minds in that cycle, kind of out of control thoughts or worries or fears. And to do that, I want to take you back into our familiar, or maybe for some of you getting more familiar story of our friendly prophet from the Old Testament, Elijah. If you've been around the last few weeks, we've been tearing through this one story week after week after week, pulling back layer after layer. And as you know, Elijah wasn't just a famous prophet, he was actually a pretty courageous guy. He stood up to this really bad king named Ahab, and when he did, this kind of act of courage, Ahab's wife Jezebel basically threatened to kill Elijah. So Elijah has to run away for his life, which is where we pick up the story. We've started here pretty much every week. We're gonna start here again. This is from 1 Kings chapter 19. This is verse 3. It says, Elijah was afraid and he ran for his life. Now I want us to pause here for just a moment because I want you to notice that this entire story, this entire saga, everything we're looking through begins in a moment of fear. Fear is the context for the story. Elijah was afraid and he ran for his life. Now, some people might see this or read this moment as an act of weakness or cowardice. Sometimes we think or talk about fear as kind of a weakness, right? Like a kind of cowardice. But notice, fear is what saved his life in the story. Because that's actually what fear is designed to do. Just a quick lesson in biology around this one. If you don't know this, you see, when your body or mind perceives a threat or danger in life, it triggers an automatic physiological response in your body. Like automatic, you don't think about it, you don't try to feel it, it just happens to you. Some psychologists will call it fight or flight. You guys have heard this before, like fight or flight? That's why some people in conflict get like loud or more angry. They're kind of on the fight side. And some people are more maybe quiet or they withdraw. They're on the flight side. And then those kinds of people tend to pair up, get married, and end up in therapy. You know this? You know this, right? It's beautiful how that works. But regardless of your conflict style, something is happening in your brain that you are not in control of. When your body feels like there's a threat or danger, your brain will get flooded with stress hormones, and that will give you the capacity to run faster or act quicker, and it's designed to do that without thinking. Why? To save your life, or the life of someone you care about. Like this is a God-given, God-designed biological system, a life-saving system for you or someone you love. For example, in our home, we keep a baby gate at the top of the stairs in our house. And we do that because our son Jude, who just turned 3 yesterday, so happy birthday, buddy. Thank you. He just turned 3, but throughout his little life, he's been pretty much this little daredevil who would just basically fly off the stairs if he weren't impeded by a gate or a wall. Well, a few months ago, we were playing around at the top of the stairs, and I noticed that someone had left the gate open. And Jude started running like he always does. He's kind of running toward those stairs, not really paying attention. And I felt, and you parents will know this feeling, I felt a surge of panic take over my body. And that led me to it sprung me off the ground. It propelled me off the ground over my son Jude, and I slammed that gate shut right before he got there. My fear saved him from a major accident or fall or even worse. And I just gotta tell you, looking back, I am so grateful. I'm so grateful that God made me to feel that kind of fear. I'm so grateful I didn't have to stop and think about what to do or come up with a plan. I'm so grateful that Jude was too young to tell mommy it was daddy who left the gate open. So I'm telling her now when she's out there and I'm safely up here, okay? So here's my point. To feel fear is not a sign of weakness or lack of faith. I'm gonna say that again because this gets real kind of messed up, especially in the church world. To feel fear or worry is not a sign or an automatic design that you have weakness or lack of faith. It's a life-saving part of how your brain and your body is designed by God to work, which means some level of fear or anxiety or worry isn't just normal, it's necessary. It's necessary. Are you with me so far? It's really important that we see this if we're gonna move through how to respond to it. Because our goal, and my goal right now, is not to have you go out there and try to live your life and never experience fear again or never experience worry again. That's not the goal of this message. And I don't believe it's God's goal for your life either. The challenge is with fear or worry, it's when those feelings don't go away, right? The challenge is when your body feels that surge of stress or that tension or that panic, even when there's nothing to worry about, or long after there was something to worry about. The challenge, to use the illustration with my son again, is when our life is just flooded and filled up with baby gates everywhere, right? We gotta be safe. We can't take a risk. Something bad might happen over and over. And we basically try to control and manage our way into a perfectly safe, anxiety-free life. Doesn't work. We end up just with more of the worst case scenarios running through our minds. And here's what's cool about Elijah's story. I think Elijah knows something about this. And I want to show you how. Let's get back to the text. The text says, Elijah was afraid, ran for his life. When he came to this area to Beersheba in Judah, he left his servants there while he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness. He came to a broom bush, sat down under it, and prayed that he might die. I have had enough, Lord, he said. Take my life. I am no better than my ancestors. Then he lay down under the bush and fell asleep. And we spent the last couple of weeks diving into this language, this picture of depression and discouragement and low self-worth. But then if you know in the story, after this moment, an angel comes and gives him bread and water. And then Elijah gets up and he goes 40 days into the wilderness to a mountain called Horeb. It's actually the same place where God gave Moses the 10 Commandments, this spiritually significant place, a place that you would think would be safe and secure. It's like a profoundly spiritual part of the Israel story. And he goes to that place. He spends 40 days there, and then God comes to him when he's in a cave and says, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" I want you to look at how Elijah responds. He says, "I have been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, torn down your altars, and put your prophets to death with a sword. I am the only one left, and now they are trying to kill me too." And you can hear the worry in his voice. So many days later, again, he's traveled 40 days. This isn't just fear. It's someone who's been living in fear, who's still living in the fear. It's sustained fear. You can also hear the heightened helplessness in his voice. I'm the only one left. They're trying to get me. I'm not sure what I'm gonna do. All the unknowns, all the helplessness. There's a writer by the name of Laura Turner who describes this kind of anxiety as a street corner. She says it's like living at the intersection of uncertainty and powerlessness. By the way, anyone else ever been to this street corner before? Some of you come here every time you make a decision. You feel, I don't know what's gonna happen and I'm not sure I can affect the outcome, what's gonna happen. Some of you go here every time you're working through a relationship issue. I don't know if the relationship's gonna go the right way. I feel helpless to do anything about it. Some of you go here every time you're thinking about the future. Maybe what's gonna happen after the school gets out, or after this job's over, or after the internship's over. What's gonna happen? I don't have any guarantees. I feel so anxious. Some of you, by the way, you found this intersection, the street corner, you built a house here. Like you spend your days here, wondering, worrying. And by the way, when we talk about anxiety and worry, and this is really important that we see kind of the layers of this, I'm not just talking about worry in the traditional sense, like the people that just kind of worry a lot. There's a psychologist named Edmund Bourne who writes about 4 different types or personas when it comes to anxiety. And we can see all these in Elijah's story. I'm gonna walk through them really quickly because it's really important to see the different kind of categories of how anxiety expresses itself or how you generate anxiety in your life. The first and most obvious he calls is the worrier. And the worrier lives by those 2 words, what if? What if this doesn't go well? What if we don't have enough money? What if the relationship doesn't work out? What if I don't make any friends? What if there's an accident? What if the future isn't what we think it is? What if the business doesn't make it? And for Elijah, it's what if they find me? All those guys who are after me, like, what if they come and find me? Like, what's gonna happen in my life? What if? But anxiety isn't limited to the worrier and the what ifs. There's another category, if you will, of anxiety. It's the critic. And the critic lives by the words, I'm no good. I'm no good as a husband. I'm no good in my job. I'm no good at this part of my life. For Elijah, if you remember, it was, I'm no better than my ancestors. The critic feels anxiety every time he or she looks in the mirror. How am I gonna manage this? I'm no good at this. And it generates more that uncertainty, more that anxiety. There's another type related to the critic, it's the perfectionist. Some of you have this one nailed to a T, don't you? You're perfect at this, right? The perfectionist lives by the words, I should always be better at my job. I should always get straight A's. I should always make the varsity team. I should always be a great parent. You can hear a little bit of this in Elijah when he says, I have been very zealous for you, God. I've always been the perfect prophet. Now look where I am. Perfectionists use anxiety as motivation. Some of you, your worry is your fuel in the morning. It's how you move through life. But here's the problem. That kind of life leads to frustration and burnout. And there's a 4th type or category of anxiety. It's the victim. And the victim lives by the words, I'll never get over my anxiety. I'll never get over this problem. I'll never be any better. I'll never be a good Christian. I'll never have the right kind of faith. For Elijah, it's, I'll never make it out of here. I'm gonna stay in this cave as long. He may have stayed there forever. It's God who interrupted him, right? He could have been there forever. I'm never gonna go back. Because what am I gonna do? I'm just a helpless prophet. I'm the only one left. And now they're trying to get me too. So I want everyone just take a close look at this list. Some of you are already doing this, and just think for a moment. Be honest with yourself. Which one of these are you? Or which 2 of these? Maybe some of you have all 4 of these moving around in your mind like all the time. Like you're like, I got all those in my closet. Like I'm with all those things, okay? And here's the struggle when it comes to all these things, whichever one you are, it's really hard to break out of it, isn't it? Like we can't just wake up and say, I'm not gonna worry anymore. I'm not gonna be a critic of myself anymore. I'm not gonna be a perfectionist anymore. And again, you can see this in Elijah's life. God calls him out of the cave. And I didn't read the part of the story, but remember God calls him. He says, what are you doing here? And then he comes, not in the fire or the earthquake or the wind, but in this gentle whisper. It's a picturesque moment of God's presence coming into his life. And you'd think, I don't have to worry anymore. Elijah could just be free of his worry. He's got God, he's got the whisper. It's like a great little devotional moment. Pastors can preach about this forever and ever and ever, right? But do you know how God or Elijah responds to God after God comes in the gentle whisper? I love this moment. I love this. Look at what Elijah says. Again, I have been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, torn down your altars, and put your prophets to death by the sword. I am the only one left. And again, I'll say it again. And now they are trying to kill me too. Sound familiar to anybody? It is word for word what he said before the whisper, which means he's still anxious. He's still worried. He's still the critic. He's still the perfectionist. He still feels helpless. This is the danger. This is the real struggle with anxiety. It's the way it just sticks to us. Even if we have a profound experience of God, we can still walk away. You can walk away from the service this morning feeling anxious. I sometimes tell people anxiety is a lot like tree sap. You know when it gets on your hands or your car? Like it is almost impossible to get that off. So what do we do? If God comes in a whisper and Elijah's like, I love the whisper, I love the moment, so great. I'm actually still anxious right now. I'm thinking all the same thoughts. What do we do? Well, we can't answer that question until we see more clearly what God did next in this moment of paralyzing and extended anxiety. Look at how God responds. I love this part of the story. A lot of names and details that will sound unfamiliar, but we'll unpack this in a moment. The Lord said to Elijah, go back the way you came and go to the desert of Damascus. And when you get there, anoint Hazael king over Aram, and anoint Jehu son of Nimshi king over Israel, and anoint Elisha son of Shaphat from Abel Mahaloah to succeed you as prophet. So Elijah went from there and he found Elisha son of Shaphat. Now what is this about? Well, I love this part of the story because first and foremost, we get a really clear lesson, a really clear kind of observation, and it's that God doesn't rebuke our anxiety. God doesn't come to Elijah and say, why are you still worried? Why don't you just have more faith? Don't you trust me? You little worrier. No, God doesn't come that way. I actually think sometimes we assume God comes to us that way. Why? Because somebody else has come to us that way. Somebody else in your life has said, just get over it. Stop worrying about that. It's not really a big deal. It's not even a problem. Why are you so worried? And I think that's especially true and can often be true, sadly, in the church as well. Sometimes the church is not so helpful when it comes to anxiety. Someone recently sent me an email about a church advertisement that said, don't let your worries kill you, let the church help. It's not the best wording for a church ad if you're in that business. But here's the thing, a lot of the time, the church just isn't very helpful. Let's just be honest. We're not. Because I think part of our problem, actually our anxiety, is to get fearful of their anxiety and say, just stop it. It's a place of faith. Put those fears away. Why? Because it makes me feel anxious. And we end up doing a lot less good than we think. But God doesn't tell Elijah to get over it. Nowhere in the story do you hear him say, Elijah, get over it. Just get over it. And neither should we. And that's the good news. That's the good news for all of you who worry. God doesn't rebuke our anxiety. The bad news is, the hard news is, God doesn't remove the uncertainty either. Doesn't remove the uncertainty either. Just the opposite. What does he say? Go back from where you came. Go back to the danger. Go back to the threats. Go back to the difficulty. Go back to the uncertainty. In other words, if you think about the street corner of uncertainty and powerlessness, we're never getting off the street, friends. I'm sorry to tell you, in this life, there's no way to get around the fact that God doesn't promise exactly how your life is gonna go or how the circumstances of your life will turn out. He doesn't give you that promise. He doesn't remove uncertainty from our lives. Elijah is called to go back, not knowing what's gonna happen. He doesn't say, you'll be safe, you'll be protected, it's all gonna go great. Doesn't tell him that. Why? Because God wants Elijah to learn to trust him in the uncertainty. Sometimes, you see, what happens is, in our desire for certainty, our desire for safety, we actually eliminate the possibility of trust. Because trust requires some degree of uncertainty, doesn't it? Think about a relationship. Think about it this way. If I went to Nina and said, I want to try to get rid of all the uncertainty in our marriage. I want to have nothing to do with it. So here's what I've decided to do. I've decided to get a Nina cam, and it's going to follow you around 24/7 so I can always see what you're doing. Would that make her feel more or less trusted in life? Okay, less trust. If you don't know the answer, you should not be married, okay? You should not, you gotta just, or time out, you gotta work on something, right? Less trusted. Some of you are like, that's a great idea, I should do that. It's for a different message down the road. You'd feel so much less trusted, right? That's why we put a camera in our 3-year-old's room, because we don't trust him at all. Like, we gotta watch all the time with that guy. Building trust requires some degree of uncertainty, and you can see this at work in Elijah's story. When God passes by Elijah on the mountain, you might remember from previous weeks, he hears a whisper, and the text says Elijah comes out with his cloak covering his face. Why? He doesn't know what's gonna happen. He doesn't know what God's gonna do. He doesn't know how God's gonna respond. How can he know? It's God we're talking about. We don't control God. We don't get to tell God what to do or how to, what to do with our circumstances so that we feel okay about our jobs or our relationships or our health. And that means, and this is the hard news today for all of you who worry, there is no way to fully eliminate uncertainty from your everyday life. There is no way to eliminate uncertainty from your everyday life. Aren't you glad you came to church today? You're like, oh, thanks, great. The job might not work out. That person might reject you, leave you, hurt you. That cancer, that sickness, that illness might come back. Friends, uncertainty is the cost of being a human being. But it's also the gift of being a human being. Because it's in those moments of uncertainty that we can actually learn to trust God. Not just to believe that he exists, but to actually trust and experience his faithfulness even when things are uncertain. In fact, faith, just if you know what faith isn't saying to God, I'm 100% certain how this is all gonna work out. That's not faith. Faith is saying, God, I'm gonna trust you 100% even though I'm not 100% certain. Do you see the difference? God, I'm gonna trust you 100%. Like, I'm gonna take a risk, take a step, leap of faith. It might just be getting out of bed this morning because I feel so anxious about the day, but I'm gonna trust you 100%, even though I have no idea what's gonna happen. Even if I feel overwhelmed with anxiety or stuck in my head or powerless to do anything. Faith is trusting God even when there's uncertainty. And while that might seem like hard news, there's some good news if we go back to our street corner, if you will. Even though we may live on the street that's filled with uncertainty, even though that's part of our life, and even though that's part of reality, here's the good news. You are not actually powerless. Uncertainty is a gift. Powerlessness is a lie, friends. It's a lie that comes to us in those moments when we feel helpless or anxious and we believe there's nothing we can do. But just because God doesn't take away the uncertainty doesn't mean he thinks you're powerless. Think about Elijah's story. God didn't say, sorry, Elijah, you're just stuck. You better stay in this cave. There's nothing you can do. Better just stay here. Again, just the opposite. Go back the way you came and then anoint Hazael and Jehu and Elisha. In other words, go back to your responsibilities as a prophet of God. Why? Because whenever your worries are raging and your wheels are spinning, God always calls you back to something you know. Go back to that prayer that's helped you. Go back to that scripture that's helped you. Go back to that friend or that life group that's encouraged you. Go back to that exercise routine that you need. Go back to volunteering, to serving somebody else in your life. Not because you'll find certainty, because you'll experience that you're not powerless. You have a choice, even when you're anxious. And if the anxiety is really severe, if it's really paralyzing, the choice, the next step might be go back to that counselor. Go back to that medication. Go back to that support group. And for those of you who feel really stuck, you have no idea what to do with this message, we have a group here at Northshore starting tomorrow called Getting Unstuck. So there's a next step for you even if you feel totally stuck. So there's no excuses for anybody, right? And notice also the call to Elijah is back into community, out of the cave and into community. In other words, God doesn't say, don't worry. He says, don't worry alone. Friends, you should never worry. Worry is gonna come. Worry is a part of life. Don't worry alone. I tell people all the time, worry with people. Find people you can worry with, right? But most importantly, by calling Elijah back to his role as a prophet, God is saying, it's really, really important. God is saying, your fears don't disqualify you from ministry. Your fears don't disqualify you for a life filled with purpose and meaning and significance. Yes, they may be a burden. Yes, they may be unpleasant. Some of you are gonna battle worry and anxiety for the rest of your life. For some of you, your anxiety or your worry, it's like what the Apostle Paul once called the thorn in his flesh, something he prayed over and over for God to free him from, and God did not free him from it. But that did not disqualify Paul, and it does not disqualify you. In fact, just the opposite. Look at how Paul described the results of the thorn in his flesh. He said, 3 times, I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in everybody. Weakness. And if you need to substitute the word anxiety, you put it there in your Bible. My power is made perfect in anxiety. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses so that Christ's power may rest on me. What a powerful image. And then he says, for when I am weak or when I am worried or when I am anxious, that's when I get really strong. Do you see the inversion in this? Friends, we think when we're worried, when we're anxious, we're afraid, we might be at our weakest. Friends, you might be at your strongest. How? Because that's when the power of God can come alive in you. And you don't have to get over your anxiety, by the way, to be strong. You don't have to stop being afraid to be strong. In fact, living with anxiety takes real courage. Living with anxiety takes way more courage than living without it, because it takes courage to ask for help. It takes courage to go see that counselor. It takes courage to take medication if you need it. It takes courage to believe that God is bigger than your fears. That takes courage, but it can change your life. Someone recently asked me, Scotty, do you still get anxious before you speak? And I smile because the answer is sometimes. Sometimes I'm back there and the wheels start spinning and my body feels tense and I'm kind of pacing around thinking about stuff. How's the talk gonna go? Sometimes I remember those days and I think, gosh, should I put on a few extra shirts or something? Like, what's gonna happen out there? But that's when I remember God's word to Elijah. What are you doing here? Feeling like you're stuck. Go out there and be the man I've called you to be, and I will take care of the rest. And that is how God works through fear. And by the way, next Sunday, we're gonna be celebrating baptisms right here in this room. And I can't think of a better way to say, God, I'm gonna trust you even when I'm not certain of things, than to take that step. And some of you need to take that very step. It's not too late to sign up, not too late to say, I wanna do that in my life. And if that's you, you can let us know on your Connect card, or you can reach out at northshore.church/baptism. Because here's the thing about fear and anxiety. The goal in dealing with anxiety is not about finding peace. The goal is finding God. If you look back at Elijah's story, the turning point isn't when Elijah found peace. I'm not sure he ever found any peace. The turning point is when he found God. The same God who always shows up at that corner of uncertainty and powerlessness, and he can show up there for you. He will show up there for you. He will be there with you. There's a woman in our church who's been caring for her husband for a number of years as her husband's been battling cancer. And for those of you who've been in that road or walked that road, you know it's a road filled with fear and uncertainty at every turn. But all the way through it, I've seen her choose faith and prayer and courage and serving others. It's been an amazing story to watch. Well, just recently, she was at a routine doctor's visit herself and found out that now she has cancer in her body. And talk about being thrown into uncertainty and fear at a level to which I can't even understand. In fact, she came to me not long ago and just said very vulnerably, I just feel so afraid. And I thought, what else could a human being feel? But I've marveled that I've watched her life, that every day in the midst of that fear and uncertainty that's off the charts, she keeps serving, she keeps praying, she keeps believing, she keeps leaning into community one day at a time. And I thought to myself, you know what? That's real power. We have a weird understanding of power in our world. Power in the God's economy doesn't look like the mighty wind or the earthquake or the fire. The power of God in our lives rarely looks like that stuff. Real power, real faith looks a lot more like a whisper from a wearied and anxious soul saying, even though I'm not 100% certain, God, I'm gonna trust you 100%. And friends, that's my challenge, my invitation to each of you today. Is not to make some kind of commitment that you'll walk out of these doors or you'll walk out of your room and never feel anxious again or always be stronger than your fears. No. My challenge is in the midst of that fear, in the midst of that uncertainty, in the midst of that anxiety, even if it feels so paralyzing to you, is to say to God, God, even though I'm not 100% certain, right now, I'm gonna trust you 100%. That's faith. And that's his invitation to each of us right now. So here's what I wanna do. If you're able, would you please stand? If you're watching online, you can do this as well. You can just go ahead and stand up. I want you to just invite you now just to close your eyes for just a moment. I'm gonna invite you, if you're comfortable, just to put your body in a posture of receiving. It could be your hands out, your hands up. Maybe this is just an internal posture because you feel so locked up you can't even move your body. But I want to challenge you to put your body in a position where you can receive, where you can hear God whisper to you. I want you to remember that right now, as you stand on the corner of uncertainty and powerlessness, you are not powerless. That you can pray. You can place your hope in God. You can come forward for prayer. In fact, there's gonna be a team of people on the sides of this room. And right now, if you're sitting in that chair or standing up by that chair, you're not powerless. You can take a step and come forward for prayer. Some of you need to do that or do that for someone you know. But you're not powerless. The power of God is here. The power of Christ can rest on you even when you're afraid. And the next step for you right now, it's a real simple thing. It's just saying, Jesus, I trust you. Not because I'm not afraid, but because I am. Jesus, I trust you. Not because I'm not anxious, but because I am. Jesus, I trust you. Not because I'm in control, but because you are. If you've never prayed that prayer before, if you're like, I'm not even sure about Jesus, this can be your moment to take that step of placing your faith in him for the very first time. You can just say, Jesus, I want to put my faith, my trust in you, not your certainty, just trust. Not knowing how it's going to go, not knowing what God will do, just take that step and see how he responds. Jesus, I'm so grateful that in the midst of the storms, in the midst of the caves, in the midst of the worries, you come to us in that gentle whisper, not telling us to stop worrying, but reminding us that you're here, inviting us to put our trust in you amidst all the questions, all the doubts, all the unknowns. And so we pray that you help us do that today and this week as we go out in the world, face all those same challenges. Help us trust you 100%, even if we're not 100% certain. And Jesus, thank you for being the person we can put our eyes on, the person we can look to whenever we feel afraid. And as we sing these songs, friends, I want you to stay in that posture of receiving, hands out, hands up, wherever you can be, or come on forward if you need prayer as we sing about reflecting our eyes on Jesus. Let's sing.
Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely in the light of his glory and grace. Turn His glory and grace.
this way. We're going to keep singing together and just giving you space to spend time with God. If you're in a spot right now, like Scotty said before, if you're in a spot where you need some prayer, you need to come ask God for something, I just want to invite you to come on up. There's still plenty of time for that. You can go over to the I said yes sign to your left. We'd love to just pray with you and pray for you. So please know that there's freedom for that as well as we keep singing, okay? And you unravel me with a melody. You surround me with a song of deliverance from my enemies, till all my fears are gone. And I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. And I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God.
Thank you guys so much for being with us here today. As we were just singing that song, that line in there, you split the sea so I can walk right through it, is a point back to something that happens in the Old Testament where the Israelites are escaping Egypt and Moses is leading them through the Red Sea, and God uses Moses to part the Red Sea and the Israelites get to walk through. And what they're walking away from, there's incredible context of what Egypt represented to them. Brokenness and slavery and bondage that the devil would use to hold them down, and God is taking them into the promised land on the other side. And when you get to the New Testament, you see a different version of this play out through baptism. You get to see Jesus himself model this act of baptism, and it just reminds me every time of when I made that personal decision of baptism. 9 or 10 years ago, I was walking through just an incredibly dark season of my life and got introduced to a local church and had grown up in the church, but at this local church, I got to experience just the new grace and forgiveness and love that I'd never experienced before, and made that decision myself to get baptized. And as I read that story now of the Israelites walking through the Red Sea and the faith it took for them to take that first step when the waters are parted, you got to believe some of them were like, I don't know about this, man. Like, does this work? And then to see that play out where Jesus himself takes that step of baptism. And I want to invite you, no matter what you're walking through, man, if you feel like you're at the shore of that Red Sea, God is making a way. And I want to challenge you, if that's a step that you haven't taken yet, that step of baptism, where you get to outwardly express just this inward decision of saying yes to Jesus and saying, Jesus, would you take me from what's holding me back? Would you take me from what Egypt represents to you into this new life, into this promised land? I'm telling you, that decision for me radically shifted my life into this life of purpose and potential that God opened my eyes to, that I would not be the man that I am today without that moment in my story. So I just want to encourage you guys, if you haven't taken that step, man, don't walk out of here this week. We're doing baptisms next Sunday. Next Sunday, it is going to be a party. I'm telling you, you're not going to want to miss it. And if you haven't taken that step, you can come up. We've got teams right here that say, I said yes. You can check it on your connection card. Just talk to someone about baptism. It will change your life, and that could happen next Sunday for you, the 12th. So even if you're watching online, we see you too. Let us know. We want to see you get baptized as well. So definitely let us know. Thank you guys so much for being here today. We hope you have an incredible rest of your Sunday, and we'll see you back. You're not going to want to miss next Sunday right back here at Northshore. Have a great week, you guys.